For this next section of notes, we are going to discuss organelles. And organelles are very similar to the separate organs in our body that help keep us alive. They're the tiny pieces that make the cell stay alive. So they're like kind of like the small organs inside of a cell. Each organelle has a job or a function which allows the cell to grow and reproduce and essentially survive. I'd like to point out on your own time, you may go back and look at the Google slide presentation and click on this right here. This is a hyperlink where it says organelles. And also you could take a quick tour of the variety of organelles that are found within a cell. Please also, while you're listening, feel free to either take notes and follow along, or you may just listen and then go back to take notes. The first part of the cell, or the first organelle we're going to discuss, is the nucleus. The nucleus is thought of as the brain of the cell because it controls what the cell does. Basically, it decides what type of job the cell is going to be in charge of, and basically what else it's going to do is reproduce or make more cells. So think of it as like the brain or the hub of the cell. The genetic material, also known as DNA, is found within the nucleus. And the DNA pretty much is the instructions as to what, like I said, that job will be of that cell. The DNA is actually what is copied and divided during cell division or mitosis so that the offspring will get the exact genetic information from that cell. The nucleolus is found within the nucleus. As you can see in the diagram on the right, it's the purple circle inside the nucleus. And the nucleolus has a really important job. They actually are in charge of making ribosomes. We'll get to ribosomes in a moment, but they are pretty much quintessential for the survival of all living things. Another organelle that is found within an eukaryotic cell is called the mitochondria. These are quite frequently referred to as the powerhouse of the cell because during cellular respiration, the mitochondria within each cell take the food that is either produced by plants or consumed by heterotrophs and takes it into a usable form of energy known as ATP or adenosine triphosphate, but we'll refer to it as ATP for simple processes here. And this basically is called the powerhouse because it gives the cell power or energy. And once again, there is another hyperlink here that you can click and enjoy at your own leisure. The next organelle we're going to discuss is the vacuole. You can find them in plant and animal cells. Think of them as like little tiny storage bubbles within the cells. So they hold water and nutrients to help the cells survive. It's kind of a storage space, if you will. And in plant cells, the vacuoles are very large, as you can see compared to the animal cell on the diagram on the right. They're large because they not only store water and nutrients, but they also put turgor pressure on the cell walls to help a cell remain upright. So I've created a fun little video here if you want to watch at your own time to see what turgor pressure is and what happens compared to a cell or a plant rather when it is wilted. And when it loses turgor pressure, which means the vacuoles have little water inside of them, and how through transpiration the cells can actually refill their vacuoles and become upright. The next organelle is ribosomes. And as I said, these are pretty key to all living things surviving. And they're responsible for making the proteins for the cell. And the proteins are used in most of the cell's activities. They can be found floating in the cytoplasm, as you can see in the diagram on the right. They're like the blue dots that are in the yellow colored in area. They will be attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is like the blue tubular structures in that diagram down there on the right. A hint or a way to help you kind of remember what a ribosome does or the function that it has within the cell is that the word rib is in ribosome, and ribs are like meat. And ribs and meat generally have a lot of protein. So ribosomes are responsible for making the proteins and assembling the proteins. So remember that the ribosomes are made in the nucleolus, and the ribosomes are in charge of making proteins. Now, the next organelle is the rough endoplasmic reticulum, or the RER, or the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, or the SER. And once again, this is a hyperlink up here for you that you can watch. This organelle kind of serves as like the highway or the transport system. Please note that it is located right outside the nucleus. You can see that kind of like cream colored half cut golf ball is the representation of the nucleus, and the folded structures right outside of that are the endoplasmic reticulum. So they are kind of like the highway for the ribosomes. So think about it in a way that the ribosomes are being made in the nucleolus, and they are sent to the rough and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum so that they can be transported to move throughout the cell. Think about it as like the highway. They're in charge of getting the ribosomes to where they need to go. And once again, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum because it has the ribosomes attached to the outside of it. The smooth does not. Pretty close to the endoplasmic reticulum, you'll find the Golgi complex, sometimes called the Golgi apparatus, but it's kind of an interchangeable term. The Golgi bodies, or the complex, or the apparatus, has many terms, will actually receive proteins from the endoplasmic reticulum, kind of package them up almost in a way like get them all ready to go so they can either be sent throughout the cell to be used or to be sent out of the cell. So since they kind of package them up from the highway system known as the endoplasmic reticulum, we like to think about the Golgi as the post office of the cell. It gets things ready to ship the proteins in the out of the cell. The next type of organism or organelle, we're going to talk about is the lysosome. The lysosome is known as the hitman of the cell. This is actually only found in animal cells. This has a really important function, though, within animal cells, is that they digest old organelles that won't work anymore, and they will also attack viruses and bacteria that enter the cell. So as you can imagine, this is critical because if a virus or a bacteria were to invade the cell, it could, in theory, kill that. So the lysosome is in charge of surrounding itself around these foreign invaders and attacking them or killing them. So a way that I like to think about this is, Lysol kills bacteria just like lysosomes. So just a tip for you to remember what a lysosome's job or function is. The cytoplasm in the cell is actually not a specific organelle, and the cytoplasm, like we have discussed before, can be found in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. But when you describe the job or the function of the cytoplasm, think about it kind of like the jelly-like fluid substance that holds the organelles in place. It's not a solid, so proteins and things can move through it, and a lot of the times it's compared to jello. So this is what fills in all of the empty space in between the variety of the organelles that are within each cell. The cytoskeleton is in a way kind of like an interlinking fence that kind of runs itself all throughout the cell. It looks a bit like scaffolding, and what scaffolding is, in case you're not familiar with it, it's in the picture that's below or outside the building. So it's kind of like the skeleton for the cell. And actually, the cytoplasm fills in all the empty space, but the cytoskeleton provides kind of like a network, a way for the different organelles to kind of move throughout the cell. The next part is the cell membrane, and all eukaryotic cells and all prokaryotic cells have cell membranes. This is kind of like the thin outer covering of the cell. Think of it almost like a baggie that's like a Ziploc baggie that's around it, but it's actually semi-permeable. It's not solid. It looks like it may be solid, but there's actually little gaps in it that let the good things in but keep bad things out. So that's why it's known as semi-permeable, semi meaning kind of, sort of, halfway. So some things can come in and out, but really it's almost kind of like a filter. It decides what the good things it wants to let in, and it keeps the other things out. The next two organelles I'm going to discuss are only found in plant cells. So chloroplasts are in plant cells only. You will not find them in any other kind of eukaryotic cell. They contain the chemical chlorophyll. So chlorophyll actually is what gives a plant its green tint, and the chlorophyll is the chemical that allows photosynthesis to take place. So the chloroplast actually captures the energy from the sun's rays, and through a process called photosynthesis, the combination of sun, water, and nutrients from the soil and oxygen, it is able to create usable energy, or ATP, or glucose, I'm sorry, for the plant cells. So through photosynthesis, the plants make their form of food, which is a fancy word for glucose, is sugar. The next type of cell part I'm going to discuss, once again, is found in plant cells only, and this is the cell wall. It provides structure and support for the plant. It helps give their plants their rigidity, or their firmness, to be upright, because they do not have a skeletal structure like obviously we do. They are found outside the cell membrane. So in plant cells, like I said, all eukaryotic cells, a plant cell is part of that, has a cell membrane, which you can see is this like yellowish circle on the outside of all of these different organelles. This green outer structure here is going to be the cell wall. It has tiny holes in it, actually, so that things can pass in and out of it. Remember that we have the cell membrane, which is a semi-permeable membrane, meaning it lets some things in. Oops. It lets some things in, but it keeps the bad things out. In order for things to get to the cell membrane, they have to be able to get through the tiny holes found in the cell wall. And for your enjoyment, I always love a good cartoon, meme, whatever you want to call it. This kind of is a play on if organelles could talk. So just in review, if you need to go back and re-listen to this video, please do. I know I discussed a lot of information. You can only listen to it piece parts. It's up to you. But I hope that you found this recording helpful.